We're about to get started. Whenever Houston's ready, we'll get this thing going. All right.
I know.
Welcome everybody to Synth Sunday number 2, the Atlanta Synthesizer Club and VLSC Records new podcast type of thing, stream. We're happy today to have a Atlanta Synth Club mainstay, Huston Singletary, hosting with us to talk about Ableton Live 11, but also whatever we feel like. So we got a lot of different topics. So probably want to start off by just asking you, Huston. Well, first of all, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How about you, man?
Good. It's great to see you.
I haven't seen you in person. I mean, obviously since before lockdown, but man.
Yeah, I'm gonna do this little gallery view while we're chatting, and I have my door wide open. So let me fix that real quick because that looks ridiculous.
Oh yeah, you better close that.
People don't want to see all the cat toys strewn all over my apartment. So anyway, so before we really get into the Ableton stuff, and we're going to do some screen sharing, anybody in the chat, say hi. We'll do some Q&A stuff for the folks in the chat. See some of the Synth Club heads are already there. That's great. But before we do anything, why don't you just tell us a bit about yourself, in terms of, you know, it's a long, obviously your life story is not what we're going to do, but in terms of your experience as a musician and then a music technologist and a sound designer, and sort of where you came from and how you ended up doing what you do now, if you had to just summarize.
The elevator
rundown.
Yeah, so I've been a sound designer and a music producer and a session player and a studio kind of owner mainstay since college. It's all I've ever done, really. So I've been really fortunate. And in my time in Atlanta, because I'm not a native here, but in my time in Atlanta, I kind of came up through the 90s and the early 2000s in the studio scene in Atlanta, back when we still have some large format studios, but you know, we had the studio environment it was really awesome. MIDI has also obviously been a big part of my world and has been since the beginning. So I've always been a hybrid MIDI enthusiast, synth enthusiast, music producer. And so kind of melding all that together, the knowledge and ability to record and work with everything from guitarists to vocalists to bands to all that kind of stuff and record labels. It's kind of like a mixed bag of experience for probably 25 years, I guess. So to kind of fast forward, so through all that, you know, gaining all that experience working with amazing colleagues and peers and producers and, you know, kind of doing a lot of traveling from like West Coast to East Coast and just working on different records. And I meeting so many individuals, especially in the kind of the producer side and the engineering and mix side. It helped me sort of translate and make some decisions in the early 2000s on really what I wanted to do with the sort of the next stage of where I was at. Because at that point in my career, I was finding myself doing tons of programming and synth work and session work, but I also found myself kind of on the other side of the glass doing a lot of recording where I wasn't really participating too much in the creative side. I was producing, which was obviously creative, but it was mostly with bands and a lot of rock and pop stuff. But when everyone would leave and I would work on my own stuff, or I'd work on commercial jingles or all these different things I was doing, then I was back in the synth world. And then I was back into sampling and all that kind of stuff. And so I really, really started pining for that. And 2004, it coincided with something else that happened, which was very significant. So through all those years of just being in the studio 24/7 and doing sound design and working for companies, kind of in the late 90s, I started doing sound design and presets at that point. That was sort of when I started that. I was doing stuff for all the Akai gear, and I was doing stuff for Korg. 2001, I started doing presets and demo songs and stuff for Roland. So that was going fine. But then got an interesting call from the folks at Ableton, who I had known just through trade shows and industry stuff. But long story short, we were opening a U.S. office. At that point, we'd only been distributed through worldwide online and through this company called M Audio. And so they were going to announce that they were going to do their North American distribution with an office and retail and all that stuff. So long story short, they asked me to come aboard to be the lead clinician and the trainer. At that point, there were 4 of us in the whole company, U.S. side wise, at about 35, 37. I remember specifically, like in the Berlin team. Now we're over 300 employees worldwide. So obviously we've grown leaps and bounds. But, you know, so I took that gig, and what that gig did is it put me in a position to this day that I absolutely love, and we'll get into that, I guess. But it also put me in a new position as far as my approach to doing sound design, working with synthesizers, and sort of removing myself from the recording studio scene, if you will, removing myself from my interaction with record labels and all that kind of stuff, and just completely put me into sound design and put me into creating with Ableton. And so that's kind of the history of that. And all along the way, my industry contacts and all my relationships with everyone from Dave Smith to Roland to Moog, you know, especially, who's like family and always has been, you know, I work on all that stuff. And so, and it's great. And I'm really super lucky and super blessed to be able to do it, you know, all the time and 24/7. But all along the way, working for a company like Ableton and working with Live, like we're going to talk about today. You have a story about that too, with your journey with Live. But so yeah, so it all ties in together. Everything that I do in Live. Now in Live 11, obviously, but everything. So, and then I'm surrounded by hardware synths and all that great stuff. But I also work inside the box just as much. So I'm the atypical hybrid sound designer, electronic musician, composer. You know, doing sound design and doing music for multimedia and all kinds of stuff, and then all the presets stuff, kind of on the side, if you will, for all the sequential stuff and Moog stuff and Roland Cloud, and we're gonna.
Yeah, I was thinking that's really great to catch us up to the present for you, yeah. And then maybe what we can do is put a pin in that, do what we're gonna do, and then at the end, let's just sort of check in with what are the things you've been working on lately, and what are some of the things you're most excited about, both as a creator in terms of patch design and contributing to the product, but also just as a musician, stuff that you're jiving on. So why don't we talk about? I'm actually going to switch this view up because we had a funny idea, you know, on Synth Sunday host interviews you. So we were going to talk a bit about what I'm doing with Ableton and kind of my journey, and the way I wanted to just, you know, I don't want to spend too long on that, but the way I wanted to introduce it is just also to mention the way I met you, which was I met you at an event, and I don't have the exact date. I'm trying to guess, and maybe if Christian's in the chat or somebody.
Comic-Con?
No, it was a synth event that we did with Ableton. It was the Ableton user group, and it was at Music Room. And it was coinciding with the release of Ableton Link. And the idea was that we were going to demonstrate how you could use Link to clock some stuff. And that was the first time I met you. And what's funny to me, and I think back to it, is that at that point I was kind of an outsider. I mean, I was kind of, Christian invited me because you had probably asked him to come. And he brought me along. And I was like, yeah, Ableton, you know, that's cool. I think we talked about it. And I was like, yeah, I think I've got a copy. I have like whatever.
You were that guy.
Numbers old, you know, like I have been way behind. It wasn't sweet. You know, I had whatever intro Ableton 6 or so. I don't know what it was. It was like not popping. And I was like, yeah, it's cool. I've used it. And I was just using Eurorack. I mean, that was really, I had, and other hardware synths and a couple things, pedals and a mixer. And I had really gotten to this primitivist kind of way of, not that modular is primitive, but, you know, having started as a kid that started with FL back when it was called Fruity Loops. And that was my introduction to music production, making beats and stuff in middle school with the beta or whatever early versions of Fruity Loops. had gone all the way to no laptop, no computer, doing this stuff with all Eurorack. And it's funny thinking back, because now if someone asks me, what are you most excited about? What's the new thing? Do you have any new modules, or do you have a new set? My answer is Ableton. It's Ableton Live.
Yeah,
That's,
always.
you
When I
know?
talk about it, you're always like, dude. But
Yeah.
what's funny in my 16 years, I guess, with a company and working with live and just immersed with people who use it, that's always the best reaction. It's always that you're sort of in that us club kind of thing, and they're like, bro, hey, Houston, this is what I'm doing now. Or a few months earlier, I might have met that person at a university event, and they were just getting started. And your journey's been great because you literally started cold.
Yeah.
You understood the Reaper FL kind of
I
approach.
knew what a DAW was. I had, because someone could start with Ableton having never used the DAW, and so if, as a teacher, you know this, and as someone, so it's like, and someone might be watching this, who's never used a DAW, and so you can start with that. But I did come to Ableton with, at least I had some basic ideas. I'd used SoundForge and Acid. I'd cut waveform. I knew some of the, but I didn't understand I didn't understand what made live special. That's the thing.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of DAWs out there, but there's some things that we're going to get into it today, that there's things about workflow, there's things about the kind of philosophy, and the blank slate of what the creative person wants to do, that live lets you go in so many directions. Whereas I think some other DAWs kind of tell you, this is how you use us, this is what you do. And yeah, you can do a lot within those paradigms, but I think Ableton is like, it's generative. There's like, it can be so many things to different people.
It just comes down to the nonlinear workflow. You're always going to have the linear, and that's left to right.
Yeah.
And every other DAW that works left to right, that's their thing. And yes, there's wonderful instruments, and there's effects, and there's MPE, and there's comping, and well, Ableton does that too. But the interesting thing is, I think a big part of your discovery and enthusiasm as you sort of kept ramping up more and more, and as you started to kind of migrate more into the generative stuff in live, as well as your really awesome Eurorack setup, is you started discovering that Ableton was also just an instrument in itself as far as workflow. It was an actual living, breathing instrument, and you were able to go long form or short form, stack things together, and just work in any way that you wanted to. And that's that migration as you started to meld those two things together, your Eurorack world and your modular world and live. And I think CV Tool, we can't leave CV Tools out either. CV Tools is a inherent part of live, which allows you to do clock and LFO and envelope, MIDI, and all kinds of things where you're sending those signals out. I think that was a big part of your...
Well, that's what was funny thinking back to that link thing, because Ableton Link is brilliant, and people use it, it's super useful. But when we had that event, that was so exciting. It was like, whoa, we can get a single BPM, we can get a metronome
stuff. It was just like, hey, dude, I can sync my iOS
this
app.
app can sync to Ableton now. And then the exciting thing for modular folks was, oh, whoa, I can take a clock from like Korg's little Monotron, whatever, Monotribe BPM metronome app that they had, and I can use that to clock Ableton or clock my modular to Ableton. That was so exciting. I mean, we were like, this is insane.
Yeah, you were on it. Yeah.
I mean, no one's ever, it was blowing our minds. So then you think about now with CV Tools, it's like, that's a whole other, I mean, not that that's not cool, because someone someone could use CV Tools this way. They could literally just take one clock, that's the BPM, that's a quarter note or whatever, and they clock a hardware synth that could never, because it doesn't have MIDI, couldn't really talk to the computer before. And now they can do that. That's cool. You can still do that. But
it's super insane. And, not to drill down on CV Tools, but just for anyone that's kind of new to live or new on the call, it's like, or on this stream, what's really crazy about CV Tools is every device that's in the CV Tools family, whether it's clocking, Euclidean rhythm stuff, whether it's LFO, whether it's shaper, those devices can just all be jammed on one track, because the track doesn't really matter. It's sending the signal out through live through your external output. So if you got anything that's 2 outputs and above in regards to an interface, You can go 3, 4, 5, 6, however you want. Take the cables like I have jammed into DFAMs and all this other stuff, hit play and live, and you're sending quarter note clock here, you're sending 16th note clock here, an LFO square shape here, and you're just jamming stuff around, and it's all synced up. And when you're ready to print, and we talked about that too, when you're ready to print your creation, it's happening in real time. You just arm a clip, and you're good.
Yeah, the resampling factor, being able to
going right in there, and that's, to me, that was really exciting. And being sort of, I'm a semi-modular artist in regards to modular. I have modular gear and stuff around, but I'm kind of more semi-modular, and so it was really exciting to me to know that I could just keep it all in the box and have it locked, like frame accurate lock accuracy. So, but that was a big part of your jump, is you were able to clock all that stuff together, and then use live as your hub, but also your landing page for all your creations as you record like 20-second pieces or 16-bar sections as audio, and then you would take those and you would cut those up. So I always thought it was just really interesting, and I've seen obviously through the years, all these different peers and colleagues and friends that have made the jump to live. And it's always that light bulb moment goes off in a different way for everyone with Ableton. But once you're in, that enthusiasm is just contagious. Everyone just kind of has this kind of half smile, sort of like confidence of like, yeah, dude, it's awesome. I love it. And a lot of times you don't even have to let your other dog go.
No, sure.
Like you're not allowed to use Pro Tools or FL or Studio One or Logic or whatever. That's cool. A lot of folks mix in that stuff, and that's great.
Yeah, yeah.
I just prefer to live in it. I was like, I just stay in it. I mix in it. I export in it. It's like, yeah. So.
Yeah, and more, I think there are people who, I've talked to people who have had hybrid approaches who are becoming more, and they're doing more things in Ableton, whereas before they would have done some of the process in Ableton, and now they're saying, well, actually, I've got my mixing and my compression now, and I'm happy. And now we've got comping, and so you can talk about. We'll get into more of some of those changes maybe in another episode. But why don't we start?
Some of that stuff will come in, because I know a lot of folks are super jazzed about comping. I know folks are jazzed about multi-lane editing with MPE. Well, hopefully I figure out some ways to touch on that as we go. But that's definitely a part two, and that's almost like a trifecta of a call where you've got specific folks who contributed to those areas that we can bring in. I'm happy to bring in, and we can have our MPE specialist, and we can have our editing and comping specialist, and
and so for the folks in the chat, if you have questions about that stuff, feel free to ask. But again, our focus today is kind of going to be on some of the developments with new sounds in Ableton in Live 11. So what are the new packs, the new effects, new devices, and what are the updates to the older ones? And we're going to throw it over to Huston for a screen share, and we can talk about some stuff. So do you want to maybe transition into that now?
Yeah, I want to what I'd like to do is be able to I just want to make sure everyone knows where the sounds are. You know what I mean? It's like, that's the thing. There's so many things, the way Live's laid out, and I'm sharing here as I'm doing two things at once. So now I believe we should see everything. So that's, today it's like, we'll go through some sounds and I'll play some stuff and we'll look at different things in the browser, but I want to make sure that everyone is aware of all the new sound inherent devices and content. They know where it is, and that's the thing. And so that's what we'll do today. So Eric, are we good on the screen?
Yeah, we're good. Everybody on Twitch can see you now.
So I also wanted to leave this open over on the right. So I'll try to do this in stages as a former kind of trainer with Live and whatnot, but it's like, I'm going to close this browser down just a little bit.
I'm wondering if we want... Okay, so we're just going to have you in the clip. I'm not going to necessarily be doing too much with my hands. It's not really a performance stream. You're just bottom right.
We could split it. It's really, I think folks just really want to see what I'm pointing at. But feel free. I don't really see what you're showing. I'm not getting a preview. But I wanted to just talk really quickly about just the sounds and the content that's new to live, especially for folks who have just jumped on board, folks who've just grabbed Live 11 or maybe just upgraded or whatever. And then, of course, all the veteran users that are out there using it. So these are the devices that we introduced, not as opposed to content, which we'll get into a second, which are inside these devices, but hybrid reverb, which is our new algorithmic reverb, also a classic standalone reverb too that uses convolution. Stunningly awesome sound, and we're gonna touch on that. And what's great about it is you can almost treat it like a synth because it also works on algorithms too, as far as sources, and you can get in and manipulate.
I saw a clip of someone, they literally loaded some samples in. They weren't even like, convolution impulses. They were like drum sounds.
The thing is, you can, I'll show it in a second. We'll focus on it I kind of laid some things out all in order here. But back with hybrid reverb, what's really awesome is that you can, it's to me, the sound. It's unbelievable. You can go to the straight convolution mode, and you can have everything from grain silos to underground subway stations to like anything that you can imagine. You can also bring, work with your own. So, and what's really nice about like every device in Live, it also allows you to stack things up. So you can have multiple lanes of hybrid reverb. So you can have hybrid reverb doing something into another hybrid reverb and all that kind of stuff. So Spectral Resonator is another really exciting one.
I love this one.
Yeah.
I'm all about it.
This is one of those rabbit hole, along with the Dylan Baston stuff I'll show in a few minutes.
Those are, I could talk about those for a whole
Fire by Nature. Yeah. And so what's really crazy with Spectral Resonator, the name Ableton's always, we've always kind of stuck to, our names are not necessarily the most academic of names. It's like, hey, we have a new reverb. What are you guys calling it? It's called reverb. So Spectral Resonator does exactly what the name says. And so you can do some really crazy stuff. And we'll throw this on some drums here in a second, and I'll show you how that works too. And so I'll just go down the list here real quick. So Spectral Time, same kind of thing, but you're starting to work with shifts in time and along the timeline. So you're able to chunk things together, move things around in that delay paradigm, but it's more about shifting and shifting layers. So really, really cool, especially when you double that back with the resonator and with hybrid reverb. So
Spectral Time makes me think of basically a much more advanced granular delay in a way. It's kind of in that realm, even though it's obviously doing different things.
And what's crazy is this. There's this right here that I'll show you just very quickly. This is pitch loop. All right, this is one of our newest devices, and Live 11. It's designed by Robert Hinke, based on the old Plubisson back in the 90s, and so that thing right here that I'm showing you down here in the bottom coincides with what you were talking about with granular synthesis and just granular audio resulting from granular synthesis. So that's the Spectral Time, and then chorus ensemble. It's game over. So this device is mad good. And it's basically 3 to 5 choruses stacked. You can sort of spread things around, and you can choose between these different sort of pedal modes where you've got the classic ensemble. So the vibrato is really unbelievable. So it's taking the chorus that's always been part of Live or in any DAW and just turning it on its ear.
I did have a question about that, actually. Is this the original chorus is gone now, right? So there is no.
No, I mean, well, that's a good question.
Because I couldn't find it. Not that I wanted it, because to be honest, I love the new one, so I'm not really worried about it.
You go down here. You go down to Core Library, and then where are we going here? Yeah, right here. We should have chorus.
I think there's just the ensemble now.
Maybe so. I didn't know we replaced it.
Yeah, I don't know if that's something. I don't actually care. I was just curious in case someone asked me, like, hey, did it replace the old? What if you have,
Well, the presets are in there.
So if you had a project that was using the old chorus and you updated, it would ask you to, like, I know sometimes when you update, it'll say, like, you're using a legacy version or whatever, and you can choose to update it.
I believe so.
I think so. Yeah.
You should call that up and look at it. Because since Live 11's been out, I haven't used the original chorus because all I use is.
I mean, the ensemble is incredible, so it's
Well,
not really a problem.
Too, it's, let's try. We'll load that up and we'll look at that. Phaser flanger, ridiculously awesome, and same kind of principle, just modulation based effect, classic. The name speaks for itself, so we'll try to go through that as well.
The thing that I really like with that, I forget, what do you call the little triangle that you click that's the expand button? Whatever that is. I don't know if there's a technical
Chooser
term.
window?
It's when you're on a device, like if you pull up Phaser flanger.
Yeah.
Just that picture. The little circle with the triangle, yeah, and then you get the larger view of more features.
Sure. Yeah.
That on that device is really special.
Yeah. Well, here, let's check it out. Let's just do it.
Why don't we do that? Not to interrupt, but
no. It's like that's what part of this is. We'll just go to our modulators and go look around for this thing. Here we go. So we'll stick this right here. And what Eric's talking about are these chooser windows that are inherent in Live in a lot of devices, and they're certainly inherent in the workflow of Live and clips and whatnot. So you open this guy up, and then that brings up these different LFO parameters, also some spatial parameters, but then it also brings up the envelope follower. And then when you start getting into mapping and all kinds of other stuff, that's where things get really fun. So, but this little button, it's a little kind of hidden away. Most devices actually have this. It's how you open the side chain on certain devices, and it's how you open up on the MPE device, which we'll look at in a few minutes. That's how you open up the shaper section, so you can shape your curves and how you set your parameter locks the way things move around. So it's just an expansion window. Sometimes I kind of wonder, like, why do we just not have that open?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the device. I know that people don't always want to look at all that stuff, and also you can totally throw the phaser on and just mess with the rate, amount, and feedback and stuff, and that's a lot. But being able to change the waveforms, being able to do that phase shifting of the two LFOs, the envelope follower. So there's a lot that I really like about the stuff that's not hidden, but the deeper under the hood type of features.
I'm just playing just a single note wavetable, but you can see how I can shape this, really get into shape this cycle form on the sine wave, which is pretty awesome.
We got some people in the comments. So someone just said, James said that the old instruments carry old implementation along if you still have the preset or a set using them, so that's fine for the chorus. But then, for the new one, someone commented, Young Weather said, offsetting the LFO phase on the phaser flanger is stereo wonder. Yes, it is indeed. Another thing on that is a tip that Huston taught me, a different device, if you're interested, which is actually, prior to this update, I didn't really use the phaser in Live that much. Now I use it all the time, but when I wanted to do phasers, Huston taught me that the frequency shifter does amazing phaser sounds and stereo widening, and I believe, it hasn't been updated. It's perfect the way it is.
Like a dog and pony show. I'll sit here and call it up while you're... It's like we're on stage at a trade show. So check it out. Here's frequency shifter. And the trick with this is don't do anything with it when you call it up. Put your wet dry at 50% and then just shift this about to between 60 and 80. You turn off the music player. Here it is dry. Okay, I'm just going to play a very static sine wave. And here it is with. All you're doing is just kind of remodding in a way, this strange way, but you're really just phase oscillating.
Yeah, and the wide button does the phase shifting for the stereo field.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Listen, I'm assuming this isn't stereo, but for you guys, listen what happens when you just bring this up just a very small. The imaging is crazy. And then get the wide, like you said. We'll bring this guy in.
Yeah, they've got stereo.
Phaser flanger is so much fun. I put it on so many presets that are in live. You'll go through there and you'll start playing like instruments, and there's like phaser flanger, chain 1, phaser flanger, chain 2. So I use this guy a lot. Obviously, I use hybrid reverb a lot in preset design for our new instrument racks. But phaser flanger is in so many places. And the latency is so minimal. Sometimes you inherit new devices in a program, and you play, and you'll sort of feel and hear the little bit of the latency just because all the processes are going on. But this stuff has been so tightened up by the dev team that you can't even, you can't tell. So, but you can see all the different notches for the phaser, all interactive in real time. So here we can see the doubler, which is awesome. Now remember, all of this stuff all these parameters can be accessed mapping from a mappable device like an LFO, or envelope MIDI, or any of the CV tools. Any MIDI effect that has a mapping characteristic, I could map any of this stuff. And some of that's a lot of the sound design work that we did too, are in the MIDI effects in live, or in right here, the MIDI effect racks, for example. So you can go in and select these, and what these do is they'll allow you to load up a preset that's mappable, ready to go as far as mappable, and you'll see it, the map, but the parameters there. So I can say, oh, cool, I want to map this LFO or this envelope shaper working at quarter notes, and I want to map it to the phaser rate. So it sort of works silently in the background, and it's a wonderful way to work, especially moving into Live 11 now, as you're able to just move and twist and shape these devices even more than we're already doing in what we just went over.
Yeah, I think the mapping is one of the things that's really gotten me to just buy into Ableton. Like, I still use third-party plugins, everybody does, and there's a lot of great ones out there. But if I can choose between a native Ableton device and a third-party plugin, if I like the way the native Ableton device sounds and works, I will always choose the native Ableton device, because the way in which the parameters, everything just speaks the same language. And obviously, it's not hard to configure an external third party. It works, it integrates perfectly with all the third party ones. But just, there's something about my workflow when I can just look and the devices all look the same. I don't have any extra windows to open up. And the linking is just so intuitive. Now, obviously, it's not like it's that hard to do it with a third party plugin. But these sound so good, and they have the parameters that I want, so I'm happy. Like I said, though, like this phaser update's a big one for me, because I wasn't crazy about the old phaser. It was fine, but this one is insane. I mean, it's really
the old one was the old one had there was a sweet spot, and once you found it, you kind of kept it there, and then you would variate between your work presets and work. So here's a mapping thing, just as it was just sort of. I think what's cool about this conversation, since there's so much to try and talk about, is that I'll follow what you're pointing out, and then we go back and forth. So since we're on the topic of mapping, and we're on the topic of MIDI effects, what's cool, I'll just play this little triad, and I just loaded up a MIDI effect, the envelope MIDI, and I can take this, and map that there. See that process. So it's basically, and now I can see the list. So now I want to take another mapping. I'm going to go to feedback, but I actually want to invert that. So I want to have that go in the other direction. Get my cursor right here. So I'm changing that. And then the last thing I'm going to do is go up here and just honestly select the output. But only have that work between a nice balance of like 25 and 75. And so now you can see these parameters are all working independently. Now I can go back into the phaser flanger. This is sort of my canvas, and I'm working on some stuff that's forcing some creativity, so I can go in and work. So all based on, just because I went in here at Snap. Isn't that cool? So then you go back over here. This is kind of crazy too. Let's map one more thing. Let's go over here. that.
Yeah, the envelope MIDI device is one of those things that you may not, if you haven't used it or you haven't thought about why you would use it, you may not realize what it lets you do. But like I've been using it, like let's say I have some, I'm not going to name them because this sounds like an insult, but I have some third-party plugins that have elements that I really like and elements I don't like. So maybe they have great oscillators, but their filters are not great. So I can sequence them in live, and I've got my MIDI notes that are triggering every note, and then I now have an envelope outside of that device that can be controlling a filter and volume. So all of a sudden I've built a new instrument within live that takes the oscillators from some plugin I have that I like, but has maybe subpar kind of older filters, and I'm using Ableton's filters that I like better, and that lets me do that.
It's, of course, we're in 2021, what's not mappable, right? But what's really cool is you're talking about bringing something outside the environment of live maybe for a moment. Some of the Madrona labs, like you and I were talking about the other day. Well, all you've got to do is just create an extension of the macro going from live to that third-party plugin.
Yep.
And then you're in live. Then you can map that macro, so then you can do things in that.
Mm-hmm. And you can add envelopes, add LFOs, all of that stuff directly into the plugin. Yeah, exactly.
I'm a rabid third-party plugin fan and kind of that hybrid artist, as I said. So I'm always doing that. Chromophone and with all these other, it's just one thing though. Like I just want to map LFO, square, just some jumping stuff or maybe some sidechain stuff, and it's like it's maybe 3 clicks. And I've got something from Spectrasonics or something from Ableton or
and
whatever.
I mean, with the envelope follower, you can add sidechaining into the patch of any plugin, basically, because of the way you can map it, like you said. So
one thing to point out too is we're kind of talking about all this and how, kind of the awesomeness of it is the fact that all this stuff that's inherent in Live 11 now, so much of it is because of the inclusion of Max for Live that is now living and breathing in all these new devices that are more topical, whereas before in Live 9 and Live 10, it was more under the hood. So there was this kind of like, I want this to happen. I've heard this is happening, but I've got to put on my hard hat and go in and like program all these different things. And now it's just, you just work, you load it, and you go. And so Max for Live, as you can see right here on the screen, so much of that is what's happening in these devices, which is fantastic. And, our Max for Live team has grown exponentially, 200 and something % in the last 2 years.
Well, you can definitely see it.
So they're all over the colleagues are everywhere, and they're just all working for the same cause. And that's just to bring the resulting sound and the resulting parameters up several notches as we move ahead. So it's been a really awesome thing to work alongside those individuals. So
that's really cool. I did want to circle back. We had in the chat earlier when we were talking about hybrid reverb, and then we kind of moved on. Someone said, Thelonious said, when we get back to hybrid reverb, I definitely want to see some experimental uses. Sure. I'm moving from Logic, and I used to load short field recordings. Birds are great, they said. They would load their short field recordings into Space Designer in Logic and run it like an abstract textural verb. I'd like to do the same or better in live. You could definitely do that. So let's take a look, and we can talk a bit more about hybrid reverb.
Let's kind of start from scratch. Again, keep in time. Let's find something that's...
maybe start simple and then make it weird.
Well, let's find something that's going to give us a little bit of a... Come over here. Let's take this, maybe a little chordal thing. Okay. So the reason I loaded this non-rack is so we don't have any reverb. Now I happen, for this set, I redid my returns and I put hybrid reverb on Syn 4. So I turn that up, open up my returns, and here's hybrid reverb. I figure I could put it in line directly, and just a quick explanation there. I could show hybrid reverb for some of you that want to, it's like in line, what are you talking about? It's like basically I could just jam hybrid reverb on the same track, and we could put our wet dry at like 50% and we could go. Or I thought another way to kind of show it is actually put it on your return track. So now I've got it at 100%. I'm going to turn the send all the way up, or quite a bit up. Now I know you're probably hearing my keys in the back. Nobody's quite invented the anti-banging on keys over microphone plugin yet, but I just like playing. Beautiful. And that's one preset. It's a preset I may call an Infinity Cave. It's somewhere in Live. I'm not sure which folder it is, but here's what I want to point out. So these are our different, this is the different ways that we can approach Live. We can work in serial, parallel, algorithmic. Also, if you want more of an understanding of what's happening with all these different parameters, you can open up your info view window over here to the left. So, you know, when you're off in the ether and you're in your own world and you're like, yeah, what was he talking about? What does this mean? What does mod mean? So as you move your cursor around, it gives you an explanation to the left. And I know for a lot of you, it's kind of like, yeah, I know what the info view is. But for those that don't, this is vital information, and this can really take you down a path to give you a good understanding as a whole about what's happening inside a device. So if you open up Pitch Loop or open up one of the Inspired by Nature, you can move your cursor around and be like, oh, I see, okay, that's what stretch means, or that's what blend means. And you can see I'm moving this around. So let's go back up here to our little pull down window here. So we've got our straight convolution, which I can't get enough of, right? So we'll talk about this for a second. Let me try to do this in quick chunks here. So convolution is doing exactly what it's saying. It's turning off, okay, this section over here, this algorithmic section, okay? And what it's leaving us is our basic attack time, pre-delay, our size, which is obviously important. We've always got EQ, which is a big part of hybrid reverb, actually. It's how you really get in and do some crazy sound shaping, okay? So what I wanted to point out really quickly is this gold mine right here. So if I click here, I've got all these different categories, and then within those categories, all these.
This reminds me almost of the way in wavetable that you can go in, and there's all the different subsections with the different wavetables.
Let's do this. I'm going to go hot swap and get more of a, I don't know, just kind of a, let's do this one. Yeah, piano hallway. So now we got piano hallway up. Give you a better idea, sort of. Let's go to the spring reverbs, which are pretty awesome to play with. So we can go in there, we go back up to real places, and this is crazy. Look at all these. When we started, I'm on maybe about a year into Live. This has been a 2.5 year process, I guess. We only had a few that we were working with, but the individual that we were contracting with and working on with to grab all of these IRs and to create them just went out, and he just went completely ham and just anything you could think of, from, like I said, grain silos to subway stations to churches. Right. So that's a look at the straight convolution. So if you, here, there it is. That's if you just want to be within this impulse response world. Okay. So then you can go to serial and parallel. You go to serial, that's going to start opening up the combination of what's happening in the convolution state on the left with all these parameters around it, right? But then it also allows you to go over here and say, cool, let's open up some of these algorithms. Let's go to Shimmer, for example. And so what Shimmer does kind of takes that Valhalla approach and says, or, you know, Chow Matrix or any of these other awesome plugins, and it allows you to say, allows you to go in and start doing pitch shifting, modulation, and applying that in all kinds of different ways. So you can say, cool, shimmer. So that's kind of the shimmer. And what gets interesting is when you start opening up the feedback, increasing the size, get the blend just right. So you can see there, it's got like kind of a weird fourth.
Yeah.
So
If you want to get experimental, you could do some really weird stuff with the pitch.
And just
but
remember,
octaves
too,
are safer.
all these parameters too, they'll default to their sort of coarse adjustment if you just double click, and that's kind of inherent in live in general. So just in case you didn't know, so if you double click wet dry, it goes to 50. I hit the pit, double click that. So if you're in some kind of weird kind of macro world and you're sort of like want to just get back, you just double click. So now let's go to Tide. Call up something different. Let's just do this, actually. I want to go here. And get Prism, which is cool.
And what's interesting is that, I mean, they could have kind of done two different devices. I mean, there already was some convolution reverb max device, and you had the reverb, the digital reverb before, but I like that it's combined because, of course, you could use each one like you showed. You could say, I just want the convolution or I just want the algorithm, but it encourages you to play with the blend and to play with the routing and to come up with these. I mean, like the name it says, like. It's come up with hybrids.
Yeah, it's a great point. And the thing to remember too, if you notice, this is what I wanted to point out. If I go to quartz, you get a modulation, you get delay. If I go to shimmer, if I go to tides, watch what happens in this area right here when I go to tides. It gives you a complete set new parameters. So now you're dealing with the wave shaping. Then the other one was Prism. Prism takes you back down to this lower bank. So yeah, it definitely encourages, experimentation and if you, like we were talking about earlier, if I go up, let me get kind of a classic reverb here. Yeah, D church maybe. Okay. This is what I wanted to show real quickly. I spend so much time in here just because, like, any dynamic effect or any sort of like destructive effect where you're going in and able to shape within the cube. Now I've just added that shimmer just because I boosted some of these frequencies here. You've also got this mode over here which lets you work with the different characteristics on kind of lo-fi and grungy and things like that. So here it is all. Then I can put it on old.
Get like a 90s reverb, 80s rack type
sound.
Yeah,
PCM, kind of PCM.
Or like the Alesis. I've definitely found some stuff that reminds me of like quadriverbs.
Like the, microverb and all that stuff. So
that reminds me, I wanted to say one of my favorite things that has changed, updated devices, is Redux, which Redux was a kind of classic, especially like the beat scene controller, hip hop influence based music stuff about 10, 12 years ago. Literally every single person was using Redux, and you'd hear it. They'd do fills where they'd, bit crush. And to the point that it almost became cliched to me. I didn't even really like the way that people were using it. Now it has become one of my favorite effects. And one of the things that has changed is the rate is an accurate, it tells you in terms of the numbers what rate you're at, which is amazing. The built-in filter is connected to that rate. So it's not a static filter. And that can be pre-post or both. And then there's an additional wave shaping to that bit rate. So yeah, we can hear a little bit of what you can do with it. It's awesome.
Here, I'm just going to play the groove. It's always the best thing, just play a drum groove.
Yeah.
All right, let's do this. Let's go. I don't know if this sucks my voice, but I'll try to talk while we're doing it. We're going to go use this dry wet down here, which I actually appreciate, because when you're putting it in line or using it sort of like in an I/O setup inside a rack, it's nice to know that it went this much, this much. Let's check this filter situation out compared to. Come on, man. Come on. Like, how fun is that?
Yeah, because then as you adjust the rate, the filter moves with it, which is like some old samplers, based on when you were repitching or whatever stuff, the sample rate would move. You'd have a lower.
Here's where things get fun. I just contain this into a rack. You probably know where I'm going, because this will kill two birds with one stone. Opens up my macros, or allows me to have some macros. Live, we now introduce 16 maximum, and we can also close it down to 1. So, which is really cool. We'll talk about variations in a minute, which was formerly called scenes. So Eric brought up a great point with this, is being able to work in tandem with reducing the rate, but increasing the filter, vice versa, or getting a balance in there. So check this out. We can say, cool, let's add rate here to our actually, let's do this. Put this right in the middle. Okay, and we're going to assign our rate to the macro knob 1, but we're also going to assign the filter to the macro rate 1. But then we're going to go to our mapping browser and we're going to invert the range. So 1 goes one way, 1 goes the other way in layman's terms. So we're going to turn the mapping off. And now, back to mapping, we invert that. Paper. Again, I'm at 100%. So if you want, I can turn this on. Gauge, record, do a little bit of automation. Now I'll go back and play back that clip. Start working with our probability and randomization and all that kind of craziness inside here. Well, that's probably another conversation.
That'll be another one. The when you go down to like 1 bit, everything below 4, if you want some crazy wave shaping distortion, that is the way to do it, because it's literally square. It's squaring it off, and it sounds awesome.
So I'm going to show that, but I'm also going to show folks too. Like if I just want to delete the automation really quickly, just in these different areas, I can do that. So it's back to square one. A lot of times that gets hidden away. I run into folks that are like, dude, I wish there was a way you could just like, you can bypass it upstairs as well in the transport. But anyway, let's talk with you.
And that's where the dry wet would be really the key.
We'll go back to what we're talking about. Here's something interesting. While that's playing, I'm going to go to MIDI effects. I'm going to go to another one of my favorites, which is Note Echo. Doing, you know, the principle of what Note Echo is in this MIDI effect has actually been around for almost 3 decades. Actually, you're just shifting MIDI notes around. It's called MIDI delay and all this kind of other stuff. But what's really awesome about this is you can go in and say, okay, let's do or arcade. And it gets really, really heavy and really, it's kind of a rabbit hole once you get in here, because you've got these parameters like the pitch. And it's kind of fun combining it with the redux. So that's another new one. So Node Echo's actually been around for a while, as well as some of these other MIDI effects, but they've been kind of cloaked in the Max for Live environment and other parts of Live and Live 10 and even Live 9.5. So.
Yeah, that's one of the things I noticed that is, I mean, it's almost silly for me that I'm excited about, but just the browser being reorganized a little bit makes a huge difference, because it's like these things were there, but the fact that you see them now in the main folders is actually really useful. I mean, obviously there's like hardcore Max people who are like, oh, duh, I've been using that. But for everybody else, there may be devices that we already had in 10 or 9 that we didn't know about. So it's really cool.
Now, I keep going to reach down and turn my room up. Now you see what I've done. I've added this envelope MIDI. Slow the attack a little bit. Open the K up. Now, there's probably 8 different things going on, all in quarter note stages, half note stages. So, here's the thing, we were talking about this the other day, Eric. Let's say that you and I are working, we're doing this online session with our glorious lockdown scenario. You're like, dude, that's it. Let's take that, let's make 4 bars, and we'll build a song off that. So I just armed an audio track. I'm just going to go to resample. Go over here and arm this. We've got the click. I grab this. See it recording here. I'll turn that off, and now I've got it over here. Ready to go. So I've just recorded this as a new audio piece. And then if I want to slice that, I'll reach over, in this case, push, for example. Right? And I'll say, hold on a second. Let me turn this on. Yeah. Over here. And now we can slice that.
Yeah, and now it's playable. That's awesome.
Maybe I want to kind of WMD it and take these up. Right? Put a little hybrid reverb on there. And then I can go in and just, or just take it back where it was. Open the slices up a little bit. And there you go. So just that quickly, we, knocked that out based on what we were doing over here with the combination of Redux, which started the whole conversation.
Yeah.
Using a little bit of Node Echo, which is another new MIDI device, which is incredible, and an envelope MIDI. Those in tandem are just super fun. And I was really happy that we pursued Redux. At first, I was like, well, it's just Redux. I mean, what can you do? And then it was like, oh, I see. If you chunk all these things on top of it, the developer they did their thing, and they did it well. So,
and you can be as subtle or as extreme as you want. There's a dry wet now, right, which is great. I mean, obviously you could do that before using returns and stuff, but like having that accurate readout on the rate control, I've gone in and I've just emulated. If I'm like, okay, I'm doing jungle, I want to sound like an Akai S950 or whatever.
Yeah.
I want to sound like an emu. You want to go to an old sampler, literally Google the specs, and then you set the rate and the bit. You do 12-bit, you do whatever, 21K, and you're there. It's really, I mean, it's obviously not the exact same thing, but it gets there. And then you have to mess with some drive and other things.
It would be awesome to have like a go-to preset bank of Redux that are based off of old machines, Core DSS1, emulator SP12, SP1200, blah, 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 MPC1, MPC1000. So, but you can see I can just hot swap. I want to say there's 10 or something presets here that lets you go through and work with those. And then, of course, if you just want to save it, easy as pie. You just do your thing. So, so I hope I touched on hybrid reverb, like our from the
Yeah,
chat
we're
asking
coming up.
about. It's deep. But the wonderful thing about hybrid reverb, and I don't want to jump around too much, we offered a shit ton of presets to get it's not even get started. It's just to work with. And so you can go in, it's like the filtered dub tech one is crazy. You open up the attack on the actual IR a little bit like that, and then take your pre-delay up, turn the feedback up, pop this to one of the silos, you're off to the races. So the best thing about hybrid reverb, and hence the name hybrid, is it can take you down many avenues, but get you to a point to where you're working with a sound that's coming back that's just massively awesome. So it encourages some really deep journeys going in there and just working with it. And so hopefully these presets, that's why I wanted to point that out, like here under special, look how many special presets there are. You know, the intercom, I had fun doing that. The intercom speaker. So it's kind of like the sky's the limit. And don't forget, you can rack this up. You can group it up, go to your chain view, and just start. I say I want this one, and I want this one, and I want this one panned over here. I want this one over here. So now I've got 3 hybrid reverbs just that quickly, doing 3 or 4 different things with different parameters. So super awesome stuff.
Yeah, and some of these, like you mentioned, the intercom and others, it's like if people are familiar with using various EQs in, you know, whether in Ableton or other DAWs, like for telephone or like these different bandpass kind of EQs, the really cool thing with this is it's both an EQ, but also that convolution and some algorithmic stuff. And it really can kind of set your sound in a place, in a kind of, you know, sonic space. Which can be really cool for sound design, whether it's for soundtrack work or ambient music or whatever.
It really is. It truly is. And also, too, that's a good point that you made. You can go in and you can also, let's say you're working in tides, shimmer, quartz, you can work with the EQ on the back side or the front side. So in the EQ setting, you got the pre-algorithm.
Oh, that's really nice. That's really nice.
And it really does come into play. And what I found myself doing, the reason I wanted to show that situation over here on the left with using 2 is because you can use 1 in an algorithmic state, and then on chain 2, you can use that in just full straight convolution mode just for your, and you can chain them together. I could take this guy out and just, you know, put him right there. And so now I've got everything in line. So I can have my algorithmic approach happening, but then I can have my space, if you will, happening on the backside.
Yeah, I stumbled into that by accident because I was trying to hot swap and I must have like already closed out the hot swap, and so then I added another hybrid reverb after, and I was like, wait, that sounds better. Like, I love it, you know. So
well,
yeah,
you know,
there's cool things you can do.
Was like the thing, and still is, if you're around like the Lex 224s and 480s and all that kind of stuff that we worked with. You know, so many of us back in the day, so much of that sound, AMS, RMX 16, was the initial init reverb, pulse, if you will, and the response going into the next reverb. Mm-hmm. And that's how you got those big lexicon and big sounds. And a lot of what happens with the Eventide H9 and Strymon and all that kind of stuff. Source Audio's Collider pedal is those dual. That's why I'm fascinated with the whole dual reverb thing. I love it. And but yeah, hybrid reverb is definitely a blast to work with. I'm glad we got to look at Redux for sure.
Yeah, why don't you go back to that main device, the on the right where you had the list of the new devices, the sort of
sure.
manual thing. Make sure we didn't miss anything huge.
Well,
obviously, we were thinking of all the things from Live 11 we can discuss, and we decided to focus on the devices and stuff, and we didn't even we got like halfway in. So there's so many things to talk about. We really could spend more time on spectral stuff, but unfortunately we have come to the hour mark about from when we started. We don't have to cut it off, there's no hard time, but we should probably wrap up pretty soon. I do want to thank you, Huston, for your time. This was really great. And thank everybody in the chat for participating. We did have one question I want to follow up, and I also want to give them an opportunity before we end to ask any more questions. So if anyone has any more questions, now's the time to ask. The one question we had a while back, someone asked about when we were mapping devices around, like you threw in the envelope and mapped it. They asked if there was like a master list, like the way that there's a list for the mappings for MIDI or for the macros, where you click that button and then there's the drop down list. I don't think this is the case, but maybe you can correct me. They were asking if there was some kind of like master list of all the different interconnections between devices. I don't believe that's the case.
Well, that's an interesting question, and I think to answer that, if I take, sometimes it's better just to start by scratch. Just real quickly here, let's just say we want to take something like, well, we'll go back to the envelope MIDI. Or you know what? Let's do this. Yeah, because we want to start with something mappable. I could take LFO or Shaper or something. So I think the thing to look at, let's take Spectral. And we'll go, do we want to use Spectral? Yeah, I guess we could. Go down here, modulators, Shaper, EQ. We could do hybrid. We'll take Spectral Resonator. Why not? That's what I wanted anyway. So, and I'll leave the instrument out. This is just for kind of topical explanation here. So it's an interesting thing that you bring up the question about the path, if you will, like a list, like an almighty list. If I was to do this, and I was to do, here's my mapping window, or my I should say my multi-mapper window.
That'll be the list for that device. I don't know if there's a list for the overall project that tells you all of the devices.
Yeah, so I don't know, but I think what's interesting is you can take this information and probably figure out going into Max for Live and have that scripted out to where it could probably easily be designed by someone who's got their head wrapped around the real basics of Max for Live. So they could say, as far as what the intent is, I don't really know. Like, I think that's kind of could be kind of an open subject.
Yeah, it depends on what you'd need it for. I think, though, there is a way it could be done. I don't think it currently exists, but someone would just have to make a Max device that kind of reads all of the mapping from devices within the project, and then you would look at that device, and it would be a list.
Here's something to kind of open up.
This is my favorite. I'm obsessed with expression
because
control.
The question that our friend on the feed was asking about made me start thinking, like, how close could we get to something like that? And to be quite honest, this probably is it, because now I'm going in and I'm multi-mapping all this stuff in what's called expression control, and I can change these as well. I can change velocity to aftertouch. I can stack all this up towards
As you could probably guess from my style, my two favorites on here are random and incremental. Those are my jam. Also, key tracking. The fact that you can map to key tracking now, you could do it before, but this just makes it so much easier to map key tracking to anything in your project. So you can have melody drive everything, which is something I love.
Yeah, here it is. Just nuts, especially you can fine tune things too. So if you don't want to hit anything outside that range, you got this minimum maximum where you don't even have to leave the window. And you could, on your project, you could say, I just want it from 42 to 45. And it shows the levels as well. So here's the MPE control, which is pretty awesome. So the MPE control can show you when I'm playing. You can see it's all polyphonic pressure. I can slide, I can move, I can slide up and down, I can go left, right, and you can see what it's doing. See what MPE control, here I'll switch my camera for a moment to this guy. So this is what I'm doing. I'm using this little stencil morph, and that's what I'm triggering. And I'm going to go back to my camera. Well, I don't need to really go to the camera. What am I doing? I'll just stay on that, because you can see my screen.
I can make it full for a second too.
Yeah, but anyway, I just wanted to show, here's one input, there's two inputs, there's three, and now I'm going left, right with my forefinger, I'm sliding with this finger, and I'm doing pressure with my ring finger. So, and that's cool. And you can stack multiple instances of MPE control. So it's pretty crazy. So, and I can also map that as well. So now I'm mapping Aftertouch to Aftertouch. Kind of crazy. Expression control might be one of the coolest things in live as far as a dynamic tool. But anyway, that, back to that question, that was a good question, but I think that's very user inclusive. I think that's something that can be done, but the next person in line is going to have a different way that they're going to want to use that. So it's sort of like the MIDI list editor.
Oh, someone asked what that controller is. If you want to talk about the morph, I can make the screen bigger again.
Oh, yeah. These are the guys at Sequential, and they make this device called the Morph Pad, which is this guy behind it. And then you get these, they've been around for a while, a couple years. And so you buy these overlays, these rubber latex overlays, and you can get them in this. This is the Buchla, but you can also get, here's this actually. You can also get a keyboard, you can get the drum pads and all that kind of stuff. But this is what's really cool. They have this developer kit, and the developer kit is an overlay that's clear. I just don't have it in front of me at the moment.
It's not sharing this for some reason. Let me see if I can fix it. Sorry. Maybe anyway, we'll switch over. Do you see it now? Do you see the cam?
Are you talking about me?
No, I'm talking to chat. Okay. I had it in the small window, but I guess the way I have OBS set up, they weren't seeing it before. But now they can see, they can't see Ableton, but they can see the cam. So we'll keep it like this for a second while you talk about
it. So they can see the morph?
Yep. That's all they can see right now.
It was they.
Sorry.
And then the other thing that's awesome is they also have these overlays. It's so simple in design. You're like, why didn't I think of this 10 years ago? They have these clear overlays, right? So you can get the developer kit, design and print your own layout, whatever you want it to be. You can have a big circle here to do this left, right stuff. And over here, you can have 4 drum pads that go to specific things in your setup. And down here, you can have just a bar to do your sliding, right? In this case, I made a push emulator. So when I put the clear pad over it, I just don't have the clear pad near me. I can use it that way. So to me, that's a really cool thing. And so their website is like super informative, amazing videos by Peter Nyber, who's their head product guy. I mean, everybody I talk to about the Sequential, it's like kind of like the Expressive E Touche. 2 weeks later, I run into them, and they're like, dude, I got a Sequential. It's awesome. So
it's just a dream, really.
It's really cool stuff. The Buchla I like is you can move around in all these kind of strange ways. And I'm a kind of a hybrid user. I'm not a full-on MPE user, but I use it for sound shaping and creating pockets of sound that I'll take later and like use as samples and stuff. I don't perform with it per se, but there's some cats out there that do wonderful stuff. So anyway, that's the...
Yeah, I think we'll have to do another session where we, like you said, have a few people on and talk about MPE. Why don't we... Yeah, I'm going to go to gallery review again for both of us. And I'm
going to show...
You can screen share one more. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to show... I don't have to really play it. I'd love to, because I know everybody wants to hear sound. It's just runs this time thing, I guess. We introduced 3 main sound packs. We actually introduced... Let me just do this. This is the best way to show this.
We don't actually have to stop, so we can keep it going.
Yeah, well, I was on this thing yesterday. It was surround sound and like sharing music. There was like 6 of us on there, and with a host, and it was only supposed to be for 90 minutes. And we ended up being on there for 3 hours and 45 minutes. They restarted it twice. And there was like 300 something people watching, and it was like, it just kept going. And so only one person pulled off, Jordan, because he had to go get his vaccine shot. So anyway, so I'm cool staying on for a bit. So here's what I want to point out. So we introduced our Spitfire collaboration. Okay. We introduced updated CV tools, but here's the cool stuff. We introduced this new sound pack called Drone Lab. And what Drone Lab is, let's just go in here. And basically it's what the name conveys. And so basically it can just be these crazy, dark, menacing sounds. It can be these long, generative type sounds. And so basically they exist. Once you download it, if you go down here, you go to your packs, it'll show you all the packs that you have that are available as a suite owner. If you're not, just go to the website and grab it. I'm not sure how much it is. I don't think it's very much. Anyway, so there's Drone Lab. So it'll show up there. It doesn't show up because I've already installed it. So what I want to do is make a quick MIDI track. And I'm going to go to Drone Lab, open it up, and I can preview the instruments. And this will give you kind of a good idea of just how crazy this stuff is. Right. So let's call up this one. The presets I made are all named after atmospheric conditions and like prehistoric fossilization and all this stuff. So anytime you see some crazy name like this, you can bet it's one of my presets.
Yeah, Natural History
Anyway,
Museum names.
Here's this. I've got my volume in my room down, so I can't know what you hear. But so there's these long, as you can, it's like the name implies, droning, super high quality. There's bow guitar, there's gongs, there's all the stuff that we did where we had these warehouses set up with all these different instruments, and we would really try to think outside the box. What's cool is we also have variations over here on the left. So if I play a sound, it's this by default, which is a sort of submersive, dark sound or whatever. I hit breathing. Changes all these macros, so then you can get a completely different thing. So if I go back over here, load up Captain's Log, I can just go to macros. This is what happens when I go to number 2. Or water foam. Playing the same single note, but just changing the variations. That right there is what can inspire moving ahead with your music production and your creative.
Yeah, something that when I was talking to some folks about it, what they weren't clear on, the macro variations. This is different from presets. It's a similar concept, but these are just changes in those macros. So it's only those macro knobs that have changed. So it's not a ton of under the hood stuff.
Right. So and it's laid out as such. And what's cool about this is you don't even have to use it. As a matter of fact, if there are not variations already baked into the preset for Live 11, that just stays closed. But here's the button. You open it up, and let's say that I nice down, all this craziness. This is how I like it. Less reverb, a little more volume. I kind of like it right there, kind of that bit crushy. But I just realized, oh man, I've changed all these things. Do I want to save it? I could, or I could just go Synth Club Drone. I'm cool with that. I hit the save button, and now it's saved. So if I do this, change stuff around, then I go back and hit variation, back. You can have up to, I think it's unlimited actually. But you also have, remember, you have 16 macros now. So, and I kind of went down that rabbit hole for a while. They had to actually tell me to chill, but I was doing tons of presets for Live 11 that were like 16, and I was stacking all this stuff. And then sometimes you may just want to, as we showed earlier, you just want the almighty filter suite.
We got a question in the chat about morphing between macro variations. From what I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's not currently a thing, but it may eventually be. But right now, the easy way, and anytime you want to morph anything in Ableton, you just throw it in a rack, and you use the chain selector, and you can either glitch between stuff with a hard cut, or you can use the fades and just morph.
And you can also assign that macro to the LFO tool.
Exactly.
You put a slow sign at like a very slow rate. The thing I will tell you is it actually is available if you want to go to maxforlive.com and download it. There's some great developers. There's 3 or 4 versions of Segway variations. They're pretty sexy too. And you can go in and it's just basically a build of what you already have, but just in Max for Live speak. So it's red and yellow, and it has the thing, and you can sit there and you can do the gradient time. And I saw a blurb on that maybe 3 weeks ago. It looked pretty cool. So if you think it, chances are someone's made it.
Yeah,
and where that exists is at maxforlive.com.
And the thing that can be a little intimidating sometimes is, but to me it's the strength of live and why I like it as a paradigm, is that there are multiple ways to do things. So you have to figure out the way that makes sense for you. Like when you did the resampling, someone else said, well, I would just freeze the track. Yeah, cool. Like everybody has different ways of doing things in live. And what's cool about live is that it lets you do them in different ways. So like, you know, one of my things I realized is I'm just coming from like modular, like I said. So I always think in terms of LFOs, when some things are much better as clip automation and doing dummy clips and stuff that lets you have, you know, this kind of movement. And if you want a very specific type of movement that's BPM synced, then the automation clips are perfect for that. Now, if I want some, you know, key tracked, modulated, enveloped modulator thing, maybe my LFO is a better choice. So I can do that. It all depends on the use case.
Sure.
But it lets you, you know, live lets you go in those different directions, which is the thing I love about it.
For me, freezing is awesome. And you could freeze a track and drag the clip to audio and all that kind of stuff. If you've got automation in there, and also depending on how long that MIDI loop is, it's going to take a second to you know, stream that over into that new audio track. The reason I like resample is it lets me just stay on that track and I can continue playing and editing. So all it took was the length of however many bars it was to print. And that's the beautiful thing about resample is you can just, but freezing is wonderful too, especially with like freezing reverb tails or just freezing an instance. It's just, I like to save time because I knew that if I did freeze that and then drug that frozen MIDI clip to an audio track, it would take a second because it would have to calculate all those modulation LFO things that I had done in there. So
yeah, that makes sense.
The perfect point. It's like everyone picks up on something that someone else is doing. It's just like, you know, it's like, oh yeah, I could do 3 things at once now. I didn't know I could do 3 things at once. I can float, freeze, and do this at once, or I can drag and drop and do this. I didn't know I could take the chain selector but then actually map that to an LFO and CV tools to do like a slow resolve between the chains without me having to physically write it and record it. So that's the beauty about the community and the live community is you can share that stuff. So here's another instrument. So it's basically, you can imagine, a really powerful, very musical, super ethereal pack. And it's called Drone Lab. The other one, just really quickly, is Mood Reel. And Mood Reel is basically found sounds, eclectic instruments. So you got everything from like crazy 24-string zithers to giant, huge metal contraptions that are all layered together. So it's super crazy. If you go over here to Mood Reel itself, you can see all these different instruments. So you've got all kinds of really beautiful instruments too. So you can go in and say, okay, cool. We finally have. So we've got our own noir Nils Fromm kind of piano.
That's beautiful, yeah.
And you know what's interesting about this, the reason I brought it up, is this piano was one of the first things we worked on. And this piano that you see here in Mood Reel is off my upright piano at the house. So I just spent like a week with different mic variations and sticking things down behind the strings and putting duct tape across certain things and me do all kinds of crazy stuff. So like with the broken piano. And then you can say, so now you've got that. And that's what's beautiful about these variations. It's nice because we didn't even have a really full build of like how variations even work back when I started this piano. So
I love it. It's so nice.
It's just a nice new texture that we have in live that we never quite had before. And you've got all these other, you can see right here, it's just really crazy. So you got all these crazy textures. Got more bombastic kind of stuff, which we want to get into There's one I did called Glitter Box. So it's really just taking, the idea was just take what we did in 9.5, take what we do in 10. 10 was a big jump from Live 9 sound-wise, and then just take it further, not just do some genre packs like we did with Chop and Swing and Drive and Glow and some of those. We wanted to do more sound type stuff to give you the tools, get in and go from something like that, which is a very kind of rhythmic, atmospheric patch, to something more. Right? If I hit this Berlin variation, right, and then you throw some hybrid reverb on there. So that's Mood Reel. I wanted to show you this. You'll appreciate this. This is pretty awesome. So if you go down to, let's go back one. Here we go. Mood Reel. If you scroll down, check out who one of the sound designers is. Officially, the youngest sound designer for any released program ever. That's my daughter, 8 years old. So she did all the cello content.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, so we got her in there. It's pretty cool. But I'm pretty sure we were talking, I don't know if there's any, so we got to start them young, man. So, but that's a look at Mood Reel. It's super deep, super crazy. And the voice box was the other one I wanted to show you. And then real quickly, maybe we go. I'll give a little visual pitch loop, which is Robert Hincke's thing, and I'll give you a quick little look at Dylan's stuff, which is the Inspired by Nature. And then we'll probably run out of time. We haven't even talked about the new core library instruments.
I know.
Wavetable and sampler. It's a lot. So, but anyway, the other one, the other pack was VoiceBox. And as the name can imagine, it's like, it deals with voice. So basically, we wanted to sort of take the idea of what Output did with Arcade, but turn it into more tools that you can use to create composition, as opposed to affected vocals or affected pitch and pitched loops to create rhythmic passages, kind of like Arcade does, which is great in its own way. And so basically, what it gives you, it's giving you this type of stuff. Right? And if we go to here, voices. So we basically contracted, I think it was 10 vocalists from all around the world, actually. Several in Berlin, obviously, but also from South Africa, New York, and some other places. Iceland, I think we have someone. Basically contribute their voices, and then we just synthesized the crap out of it and just gave all these different tools. You got these drum racks, which are pretty awesome. Cool is these macros allow you to do all the stuff that like Arcade does without, but you can take this, change it to major. Bass parts, valve, focus, timing. Pretty awesome. So you got drum racks, and then you also have an instrument layout. Pretty cool. So the other thing is pitch loop, which is pretty insane.
Yeah, I could talk a bit about pitch loop.
Yeah, man. Feel free. For me, it's like, here it is. I think I've just got like an electric piano in front of it. So basically, it's an audio effect. It's kind of an instrument, maybe, in a way. But it's an audio effect. It's like hybrid reverb, but with pitch.
So what's really cool in terms of using it as an instrument, I mean, you do have to feed it something. But if you hit the infinite thing, you can trap a loop in there and it'll stay. And then it does respond to MIDI notes. So you can send, it shows up as in the drop down on a MIDI channel, the MIDI 2, you can send MIDI to the pitch shifting. So you can actually sequence it.
I'm not.
Not audio, but MIDI. Yeah.
How about here?
If you make a MIDI track, like any MIDI track,
Yeah.
now if you go to MIDI 2, pitch loop shows up as a destination. Yeah.
Right. So like
exactly.
Yeah, okay. So then you just put it in input. Right. And so then if I take electric out, right, and then I'm just feeding in an audio source, I can actually pitch that.
Yeah, you could send whatever you sent it, it would be getting sequenced from that channel. Yeah.
That's awesome. So yeah, you're able to manipulate and move around. Again, here's the dry sound. And here's pitch loop. Kind of cool. And then lastly, if you will, is it here? Maybe I moved it. I think I moved it. Let me just call it back up again. Inspired by nature. This stuff, man. Super crazy. So let's get a new MIDI track, like we need another. And we will say here. Can we hear that?
So yeah, you had pitch loop still.
Are you using this, Eric? For stuff you're doing?
I actually haven't dug into the tree tone. My favorite thing in this pack so far is bouncy notes. I've used emit. Yeah, bouncy notes with a. Yeah, I love it on any kind of physical modeling or stuff like that.
You know, I was doing that this morning. I put collision on there, and then I was doing something with chromophone or something. But
yeah, exactly.
Let's do this. Let's go find something that's got some. We also redid a very large amount of all the default presets that come with collision tint, and I did a bunch of new Carpless type stuff that it's all buried in there. Here. This will be perfect, I think. Is there a preset that you like, Eric?
I've just started from scratch and made my own. But yeah, a walk up is cool.
You can draw these. I guess they're called lanes. Are they lanes?
Oh, that it'll get frozen or stuck in and stuff. Yeah.
Find these
speed and gravity and they're all very.
Yeah, you find these pockets and then you're like, oh, there it is. That's what I want.
I like doing, for more random stuff, random direction is cool, but if you want to do a specific kind of ascending or descending phrase, then obviously you don't use that. But if you want it to just flow everywhere, the random direction setting is awesome.
Every note that I'm playing. Here's what Eric's talking about. Now when I play it, I input new data.
If you want it to be in key, you can click the little keyboard icon on the bottom there, and then select a scale.
So you can say, awesome. This, what I like is, what's not to like, go up here, blues, 2-part, go to reverb. And there's so much stuff, man. It's like there's the tree stuff.
Yeah.
If we go under, here it is.
There's some like granular sampling. The emit is like a granular, and there's the various vector devices.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to. That's exactly where I was going. So let me. Let me take a second. Might be the Vector FM stuff might be my new favorite. So I was trying to find out the heat. You know what I mean? It's like you're off to the races.
That's the kind of thing that if you didn't know what was making it, you would assume it was like a wall of modular. It's crazy.
Man, check this out. You can shift the quadrants right here. I know we're going down this rabbit hole on Inspired by Nature now. Pretty nuts. What's neat though, I'll tell you what's neat, is you just say, okay, I like all this craziness, even though the release is really long and it's kind of bathed in whatever. Just turn it into an instrument rack, and then just go back up here, and then take your favorite wavetable, patch or your favorite pad or whatever, and then just start and just use this as sort of a background layer against your other collision, your new collision preset. So it's kind of a really cool, wonderful way to work with these instruments, especially with something as dynamic as the Inspired by Nature. Use that as a color that sort of surrounds your main instrument, which would be this one.
Yeah, it could be up front and be the main event, or it could be texture, it can be all these different things. Noise, people think about noise for texture, and there's way more than just, white noise or filtered noise. There's all these other ways you can generate that textural atmosphere and stuff, and these tools are really great for that.
You can go on for days. Drum booth was the other thing I was going to show, but basically I don't have to. It's just drum booth was completely overhauled. We hired drummers from all over the world playing everything from super deep tribal rhythms to off-center cadence stuff to standard rock shuffles, and we recorded all that as MIDI data and applied it to our sampled drum kit library, which is called Drum Booth. So it's our live kit, addicted drums type stuff. So that's totally redone. And what's really nice about that is we had someone on the team that worked on the drum booth team, spent 6 months, and all they did was populate the MIDI clips categories. So now you have all these inspirational MIDI clips in drum booth that you can just bring into your production. Drum and bass with KJ Sakwa to whatever. And you can bring that stuff in and just lift your tracks out of the gate. We didn't have that before. It was only in Drum Essentials with more of the hybrid sort of electronic type of kit. So it's cool. And they're recorded in real time with drummers in studio. So it's not that we would put stuff in that was all stiff, but I'm just saying it's there is something about, as I sit here and pantomime drums, there's something about that feel. Yeah. And it's one of it's going to fall into one of these hidden Live 11 gems, as well as many other things will, but it's there, and I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, so
if there's anyone left watching.
Yeah, no, we've got some people in the chat. I guess we'll do a final call for any Q&A stuff, and then if you wanted to also maybe mute that drone for a second. If you wanted to also just give a shout to circle back to where we started with what you work on and things. I know you've talked about, as we've gone through, various packs and things you've contributed to, and you talked about that within live. But if you wanted to maybe take a last sort of the plugs section and shout out some of the other things you've been working on or you're excited about.
I like to talk about some of these other things because I think they're awesome tools that everyone should check out. And so one of the great things about my role with Ableton and being there, being with the company so long, is I'm also able to branch out and do things as well. A lot of times with companies that we're actually partnered with. So as a lot of you know, you buy your new interface, you buy a new keyboard, you open your Atari or whatever, take it out of the box. It's like, oh, Live's included or Live's on the box or whatever. Well, that's cool. But what's really nice about my role is Ableton's afforded me the opportunity, within reason, obviously. I'm not going to go do sound packs for Logic. Should I unshare or did I unshare? You unshared me.
Yeah, I did it for you.
Is that I'm able to work, which is awesome. And it's my favorite thing on earth, is to work with other companies, whether that's Plugin Guru with Unify or it's doing all the preset, well, not all the presets, but doing big chunks of presets for all the new Dave Smith sequential synths that come out, or doing the Roland Cloud packs. And that's another one that I work with. So if you go to Roland Cloud and you go to their packs for all the presets, there's like 10 or 11 packs in there. They're packs that I've done, and they just vary all over the place. So that kind of stuff is a super blast to do. Novation with Peak and tons of plug-in companies and Addictive Keys and Addictive Drums and Spectrasonics. So it lets me stay busy with that stuff, kind of late night, weekends, times where I take a day off and I just work on crunching a Roland pack or whatever. So so that's a lot of fun. And I enjoy it so much. And it also keeps me grounded on my composition. So I got a lot of ghost stuff that's out there where I work with composers and multimedia and things like that, where I contribute arrangements and production and stuff like that. And so, and the reason I do a lot of ghost work, if you will, which is kind of a used term, I guess, for a while, but it's like, it keeps the distractions with publishing and all this kind of stuff kind of out of the limelight of what I do full time, which is my Ableton role, which I always want front and center. So if suddenly I'm out there being a YouTuber synthfluencer or something, or I'm doing like this major motion picture soundtrack or something, it gets distracting. So a lot of times I'll just do things under these sort of compartmentalized pseudonames or whatever, or packs. There are a lot of packs that are floating around out there with Cymatics and some other companies that I'll just contribute to. And a lot of times I just do it, but you know, everybody needs new stuff to work with. And so a big part of my world is doing sound design and live and doing sounds for synthesizers that a lot of folks out there use and third-party plugins.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. It was an awesome talk today, and I really enjoyed the tour through live. I hope everyone else did too. There's a lot more to say about Ableton Live, and so we're going to definitely have you back on, and we'll probably have you and a couple other guests, and we can
I'll jump on anytime, and I can always wrangle up some get some diversity too. There's some folks I know that are outside of North America that are just badasses. They can like really break down MPE, working with the probability and the MIDI lanes and all the cool stuff that's in live. I know someone in Denver that can talk about comping. And we could all get on there and do a really cool sort of like town hall thing. Where
that sounds good.
We did yesterday. Yep. It was like we did this whole thing on surround sound and sharing music, and it was crazy. It was like Jordan Rudess and Herbie Hancock and like all these people, and it just worked. So it's interesting. 101 is awesome, and then if you get multiple folks in there talking about things, it's like it's a lot of fun. So
yeah,
I'll be happy to it. Time, man. You just let me know.
Okay, that's
always
great.
Down with the Atlanta Synth Club. You know that.
Hell yeah. Well, hopefully we'll have some in-person stuff. People have mentioned that in the chat. Hopefully once again we'll do that. But in the meantime, we're here on Twitch. We'll be posting about it. Please, if you're on Facebook and Instagram, go ahead, join the Synth Club on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram. If you don't use those platforms, that's fine. We have a Discord, and we'll share the link for that. So join the Discord if that's something you do. Otherwise, just keep an eye out for us on Twitch. We'll post archives on YouTube. And thanks again for everybody for participating in the chat. And thanks again, Huston, for joining us. So
got it.
we'll call it there.
Thanks, man.
All right. Talk soon.